Perks of being a wallflower. The beautiful dandelion growing through a crack in the cold cement floor of the psych ward. So, I can't remember if I've done this on the podcast before, maybe, or the YouTube channel, whatever you want to call it. Both. I might have done it once or twice, but very few have I reviewed the book and the movie at the same time. But for reasons that will become apparent soon, that is what we're doing. So, the genre speaks to both of these because the movie stays incredibly true to the book. I would say it's a drama, YA, kind of coming-of-age story. I can't pronounce the word. Epistolary, I think. So it is a book or a story told through letters that are being written to somebody. Stephen, I forgot to look up how to pronounce your last name. Stephen Chbosky. I don't know how to pronounce it. But he is the writer of the book. He also directed the movie, which is why it stays so true to the book. Rather than just being, a reference to them, not a reference, a reference. I don't know what you'd call it, but sometimes a author of a book is making themselves available. They make themselves available to the producers, writers, directors of a film to try to get them to tell the story or whatever. There's a word for that, but I can't think of the word. Anyway, the book was published in 1999. The movie did not come out until 2012. So we got quite a big gap there. If I can do math, that would be 13 years, I think. But guess what? They're both fantastic, and despite the fact that the movie came out much later, I don't know why it took that long, but they did it right. So now there's no spoilers in the book or in the review. Man, I can't think today. Great for doing a review. No spoilers at all, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's melancholy, happy, sad, beautiful, romantic, and honest. Basically, man, where do I start? We're trying to summarize this thing and to get you to watch it. I mentioned the fact that it is... Okay, so when I read it, I was like, man, this is sad. It is a sad book, but it is happy sad. Depending on your outlook on things, you could say that everything works out in the end and it's fantastic and great, and I don't mind saying that. I don't think that's a spoiler because it is definitely bound to your perception of things. But there's a lot of sadness in this book. There is. But again, it's happy sad. It is really melancholy a lot of the time. I feel like that we are reading the thoughts of someone's life, again, written through letters to someone else, how they are interpreting their life and how these events are shaping them and what's happening here through a person who is struggling with their mental health. We don't know exactly what it is that they've been diagnosed with necessarily, not that I recall, I don't think that comes up. But we know that they have a past, they have a history where these issues have been present, and they've had a lot of trauma in their life, and they're just trying to make their way through high school, basically. So there's that coming of age part of this that, it's their first year of high school. They're trying to leave some other things behind and trying to start fresh and trying to fit in, but also they can't really do anything other than be themselves, which is one of the things I really love about the book, and why I think it's important. We're just some foreshadowing, and I let that slip too early. But it is very beautiful in its sadness, in its the relationships that you get to see that are being built and mended and worked through. I would say that it doesn't have particularly like flowery language that makes it beautiful. The diction is just kind of where it should be for the writer and being that age. What are they, 15, I think? And sometimes they're learning new words and they use them a lot. The romanticism in here the romantic aspects are more of a romanticism. It's not about like, oh, this is so romantic, like it's a romance novel. Like, no. It is romantic in the fact that there are just beautiful relationships and scenarios and reactions, and there is things that you can romanticize, like certain relationships, friendships, family aspects, loyalties, and there are things that you can say, man, like that seems so nice and beautiful and wonderful, and it's just I don't know how, it's just in a lovely way that things are done. And there is this honesty to it. There's a beautiful honesty here that is not crass, but is so innocent. Like this innocence that permeates the book because of this character of Charlie, our main character, who in the movie is played by Logan Lerman. I'm mostly talking about the story and in and of itself, because the movie does lose a few things that are in the book, but it didn't need them to tell the same story on screen. And there's a few differences there, but they're not thematically different that it ends up being a different story. It's the same story. The spirit of the book is there 100%. I would say that if you've watched the movie first, you would still get something out of reading the book. That's not always the case. Like in the case of Fight Club, I don't think you need to read the book if you've seen the movie. I just don't. It stays so true to the book that there's just not a lot more you get out of it by reading the book. In fact, I just think the movie it tells the story better than the book does. But in this case, I recommend both. If you like to read, pick up the book. If you like to watch movies, watch it. If you like to do both, do both. It kind of reminds me of The Breakfast Club in a way, and I kind of had that epiphany today, because there is this innocence there. We've got these kind of like a misfit crew of characters in a way, but this is way more about one person, whereas the Breakfast Club I do not think is about one person. It is about the nature of teenagers in high school and how they are diverse and different, and that we don't fit into stereotypes, even though you are a stereotype. But like, you don't neatly fit into a box. You're an individual. That isn't the theme here at all. But there is this little bit of like, man, these people are so cool. Like that's how I just feel like all those things that make a person, if they're a genuine person who, I don't know, has a rich history and background, and they take that into their present, and like, which is most people, I think, but at the same time, there's far too many people who are content with being like everybody else. But I think these characters are rich and diverse, which we'll get into, because there's some things that are not diverse about this book. But it just reminds me of The Breakfast Club in the way that, like, man, these characters are really cool. Like, they're not supposed to be cool, but they're super cool. Like, they're just really awesome. And it was like, I wish I had friends like these in high school. I would have had just, like, the best time of my freaking life if I was Charlie. Well, maybe not. But, I mean, if I had Charlie's friends, put it that way. I mentioned trauma. So one of the things I love about this book is that there's an expression of generational trauma and the realities of that, and how that can get passed down, and how the consequences of those things, and how someone else might have to deal with those things. It discusses mental health in this great way. I feel like it is easy to swallow. I don't feel like anything's forced down your throat. I feel like it's just comes up very naturally in the book, and that it is just one of the things that is touched on through this just like coming of age story. One of the things that I find interesting here, when I mentioned that I kind of hinted at a lack of diversity, the setting here, I didn't think about it that much sometimes, because you're so wrapped up in the story, and this could happen anywhere, I think, to a degree. Not really. A lot of these things could just happen in a different setting, but we are in the suburbs. We are dealing with characters who don't have a financial strain. That's not one of their worries. Part of me likes that, though, because representation is, if we talk about the opposite about representation, it matters. And I think that it is hard to tell this story this way, because a lot of people would rather put these characters having this added concern of finances or living in poverty or someone loses a job or whatever else. And those type of conflicts aren't here. They're not here at all. But people are still people, and people still have problems. And I find it very difficult for someone to tell that story honestly that is also gripping and doesn't make me roll my eyes because this person had all these advantages and boo-hoo, like whatever. I don't do that here. It is so genuine and sincere, and the fact that, like, yeah, I've recognized for a long time, like, people with money still have problems, like, whether it be because of abuse that they've suffered, or are suffering now, or just the fact that, like, again, like, I mean, if you think of someone who maybe their parents are working all the time and have other interests and they didn't really want to have a kid, and they've got all their finances figured out, so that's not an issue, but they're not caring for their child in a certain way. Because that can happen, finances or not. Abuse can happen, finances or not, right? Mental health struggles can happen, not just to people who have to figure out how to pay rent and buy groceries, but like mental health problems can happen to anybody. And it doesn't matter. So like I like the fact that this does that in such a genuine way. I don't roll my eyes at it. I'm not like, it just, yeah. It is an important part of the book. And I like that representation there because I don't think that it's done well. Hardly ever. It focuses on relationships. I mentioned like, oh man, just like I wish I had those friendships. So I mean, we're focusing mostly on Charlie and in his high school relationships with people, with sometimes other adults, teachers, his family, friends, enemies. Not everything works out, but some things do. Target audience. I would say if you don't mind being happy sad, if you still can get something out of the book, if it doesn't depress you too much or whatever. I mentioned happy sad because some books are just sad, period. But this does, I think, if you need it to wrap up for you, I think it will, but it depends on your perception of things. I just think that it carries a lot of weight, but it's good weight. So if you're into coming of age novels, I think this is a great one. I think that you can learn a lot, and especially as an adult reading it or watching it, it can bring up a lot of stuff, and it's a good reminder about some things. But it also just it can make you reflect on things in the present as well, and how you treat people and yourself. I think it's an important book. I think that its function is more than just entertainment. I think that it just carries so much weight, but it's presented so well by this great storytelling that it doesn't feel pushy or so strong. Even though the sadness is there, you feel it. It's not presented in such a way that it is difficult to take in. There's enough levity here. There's enough moments of humor that can guide you in the right direction with a little bit of a lightness in your step, despite the fact that there's heavy things happening all over the place. So I think it's important, again, because of that representation aspect of the suburbs in this specific way, that people have problems. And that despite the fact that I would safely say that our characters are all also white and well off, I still think there is enough diversity in the problems here. Because I guess you could say that about Breakfast Club too. It's just like a bunch of white people. You obviously, for representational purposes, could add someone of a different culture in here. I wonder how much that would change things. And I wonder if they would change them for the better. Because again, representation is important. But here, the setting, I think that this story is still important. I don't think it needs to be changed. And I think that it still expresses a certain kind of diversity here that, I mean, maybe people will argue this, but I just think that it is still important and it makes sense. What I think is really important about it is that it's such a realistic, I find that it's not that fantastical. there's a scene or two that I'm like, okay, like wow, like that took a lot of confidence or whatever. Um, and I don't know if I wouldn't be able to do that, and I don't know if that's within that character, but I guess it is. But there's enough reality here, and mostly hope that yes, things happen, and they can get better. And I think that this expresses that incredibly well without being an after school special. To me, this does not come off as cheesy or hokey. It's very genuine, and there's a lot of substance here. So I think it is an important book slash movie. It is top shelf for me. The movie's done so incredibly well. I love Ezra Miller. I've never really been. I haven't had a reason to be a fan of Emma Watson in any regard. She does fine acting in this movie, and I don't know if I've seen Logan Lerman in anything, but he does incredibly well as Charlie, incredibly well. And yeah, I just think that everything came together, and it's a great movie. I think this is one that it has realistic edge to it that could be appreciated in its sincerity by a teenager. I think it is YA. I think it is for them. I think that it needs to be for them. I think that that message of hope is present, but it is not done in a cheesy way. I think that it is sincere and that it is authentic. Perks of being a wallflower.